소포가 배달이 됐습니다. 그리고 그 소포 안에는 책이 한 권 들어있었는데요. 그 책의 제목이 바로 블러드문이었습니다. 바로 이 책인데요. 저는 이 책의 내용을 전혀 모른 채 읽다가 그야말로 굉장히 충격적으로 이 내용에 빠져들게 됐고요. 밤이 새도록 읽게 되었습니다. 그리고는 도대체 이 책을 쓰신 분은 어떤 분일까 굉장히 궁금했고요. 그래서 마침내 이 블러드문의 책을 쓰신 마크빌츠 목사님을 뵙기 위해서 미국 시애틀까지 찾아왔습니다. 오늘은 마크빌츠 목사님과 함께 블러드문 그리고 이스라엘에 대한 이야기를 들어보도록 하겠습니다. 목사님 이렇게 만나주셔서 정말로 감사드립니다. 감사합니다. 우선 한국의 크리스찬 독자들에게 인사를 좀 부탁드리고 또 본인 소개를 좀 구체적으로 좀 해주셨으면 좋겠습니다.
Hi, welcome to all the Korean people. Great to see you, and I'm really looking forward to this interview. I'm Pastor Mark Biltz of 엘샤다이 Ministries, the author of the book Blood Moons.
엘샤다이 선교회가 어떤 선교회인지 좀 소개를 해주시겠습니까?
엘샤다이 Ministries, I started about 14 years ago, and it is a congregation that is trying to be a bridge between Israel, the Jewish people, and the non-Jewish people. We're a teaching ministry, mostly, and we have a website that reaches more nations than are members of the UN.
책에 보니까요, 하나님께서 천지 창조를 하실 때 해와 달과 별을 창조하셨는데 이 해와 달과 별이 우리에게 빛도 주지만 하나님이 우리 인간과 소통하기 위한 도구로도 사용하신다 이런 얘기를 하셨어요. 해와 달과 별이 어떻게 하나님과 인간이 소통할 수 있을까요?
In 전세계에 1:14, it talks about how God created the sun and the moon for signals. Most people don't see that, but that's the number one reason he created it, was to send signals to us people below who are paying attention. And then it says it's for seasons. Now, I don't know how the word seasons is translated in Korean in their Bible, but in English, seasons is the wrong translation. It really means an appointed time. Like God has a day timer or a calendar, and He created the sun and the moon to send signals at His appointed times, like Passover. And so when we see solar lunar eclipses on Passover or on the Feast of Tabernacles, we need to be looking up and asking God, what is He trying to tell us?
그럼 역사적인 그 사건 속에서 그런 일들이 실제적인 일들이 있었던 것들을 소개해 주실 수 있습니까?
For example, around the time that Jesus died, 32, 33 AD, there were solar and lunar eclipses on all the biblical holidays over that 2-year time period. In 70 AD, when the temple was destroyed, there were solar and lunar eclipses all around the biblical holidays. You go to 1492, 1493, with the discovery of the New World, what had happened was that was when all the Jews were kicked out of Spain, and they had to have a place to go. There were solar lunar eclipses all around that time of the Spanish Inquisition when the Jews were being persecuted. You fast forward to 1948, that's when Israel became a nation. And what do you see? There were 4 total lunar eclipses in a row on Passover and Tabernacles in 1949 and 1950, signaling this was a God event. And then what happens? In 1967, when Israel recaptures Jerusalem, you have these 4 blood moons, lunar eclipses in a row on Passover and Tabernacles in 1967. And now we have it happening again in 2014, 2015. There's these 4 total lunar eclipses or blood moons that are happening on Passover and Tabernacles. And historically, that has meant war and Israel very much involved. So I'm not setting any dates or saying what definitely will happen, but based on the historical pattern, this is what has happened. And so we need to be watching prophetically what God is going to be doing.
그게 이제 테트라드라는 건데 테트라드에 대해서 좀 자세하게 한번 다시 설명 좀 해주시죠.
Tetrad is a scientific term that means 4 total lunar eclipses in a row without having a partial lunar eclipse or what's called a penumbral lunar eclipse in between them. So it's 4 total lunar eclipses in a row. Now, how often does that happen? What is the science behind this, the math behind this? Over 2,000 years, the last 2,000 years, you've had 64 tetrads, okay? But only 8 of those tetrads have fallen on the biblical holidays. So we're talking only 8 times in 2,000 years. You look at the last time, 1967, Israel recaptured Jerusalem. The time before that was right after they became a nation in 1948. Then you go back about 400 years to 1493, 1494, and it happened during the persecution of the Jews. And you also see it just going back through history, several more times. Now, we don't have all the historical records to know exactly what happened. But from doing research, it looks like it's definitely tied to the rise of Islam and to different things, historical events.
그럼 그런 일들을 선지자들도 많고 또 이렇게 예언을 하나님의 음성을 듣고 예언을 하는 사람들도 있는데 하나님께서 그렇게 사람들을 통해서 그런 일들이 일어날 거라고 예언을 하시지 않고 그렇게 해와 달과 별을 통해서 하나님께서 이렇게 그 메시지를 전하려고 했던 그 이유는 뭘까요?
The reason why God uses the sun, the moon to let us know what's coming, no false prophet can manipulate these things. This is totally out of man's hands. Not only that, the eclipses speak to every language. What's the best way for God to communicate to humankind with multiple languages, but with a sign that everyone understands in their own language? Throughout this year and a half time period, every nation of the world will be able to see one of these eclipses. And so I believe God uses the sun and the moon because it's out of man's reach, it's out of man's control, it speaks to every nation. And when you look at the science, you only get over 5,000 years, you only average 1 total lunar eclipse every year and a half. Here we have 4 in a year and a half, and they're falling on the biblical holidays. So when you look at that, and you know how God created everything scientifically, He said in Genesis, He created them for signs. Historically, we see these things happening. We need to pay attention.
예수님이 돌아가실 때서부터 지금까지 계속적으로 그런 일들이 있었다면은 2000년 동안 많은 사람들 또 많은 선지자들이 있었을 텐데 그 사람들은 그런 해와 달과 별을 통한 하나님의 메시지에 대해서 그 비밀에 대해서 알았을까요? 몰랐을까요?
Well, here's what's important to realize. Even in the book of Daniel, it says in the end times things will be opened. Knowledge will be increased. That we talk about seals that are being opened in Revelation. A lot of the people back then at that time never paid attention. It wouldn't have meant anything to them. But I believe this is revelation that has opened now so that we can go back and learn. It says everything that happened back then was for examples, for us, upon whom the ends of the world are come. So I believe God, we never had NASA 2,000 years ago. We weren't able to track eclipses and have this knowledge. But here now the internet is here, the knowledge is there. And so now we can go back. Think of a cold case. For example, a murder mystery. They don't know who killed somebody. Well, they didn't have the capability to do DNA. But now they have the capability to do DNA testing, and they can go back and solve a case from 30 years ago because of the new technology. Well, it's the same thing. Even though they didn't have it back then, we can do something about it now. I think it's the same thing. Even though back then they may not have made the connection, God has made the connection. He's revealed it to us today where we can merge science and history and the scriptures together and see what's coming.
그럼 그 테트라드의 비밀을 제가 책을 읽어보니까 2008년도에 목사님이 발견하게 되셨다고 그랬어요. 어떻게 이 비밀을 2008년도에 알게 됐습니까?
In 2008, I saw a total lunar eclipse or blood moon over the Temple Mount. And I remembered the verses in the Bible that you read in Joel, in Isaiah, in the Gospels, in Acts, in Revelation about the sun turning to sackcloth and the moon to blood. And the plain meaning of that is a solar or lunar eclipse. And so I was contemplating about that, and I thought it would be fun to go to NASA's website that has 5,000 years of eclipses, because it's all math, and see if there were any interesting eclipses coming. As I looked over the next decade, and I saw in 2014 and 2015 these 4 total lunar eclipses in a row. And I thought, wow, how often does that happen? And I was looking at when they happened, and they happened like in March and September, April and September. And I thought, you know, wow, that's interesting. And at the time, I was getting up early praying, about 4 in the morning to about 5 in the morning, every morning. And I'm in my prayer closet. And as I'm praying, all of a sudden it hits me, I need to put these on the biblical calendar. So I go back and I have a software program where I can go back to the biblical calendar from any date on our calendar that we use. And I noticed they happened on Passover and Tabernacles, these 2 years in a row. And I thought, oh my goodness, God created these for signs on his feast days. Here they're on his feast days. So then I started to do the research of how often this happened. And then when I saw they happened in 67, and right after Israel became a nation in 48, I thought, oh my goodness, this is incredible. So I just really started doing the research and looking at the patterns to see the pattern. Again, in Genesis, God created the sun and the moon for signals. And if we don't know the signal, we're going to miss it. In baseball, the coach will tip his hat or wiggle his nose or rub his arm to signal the base runner if he's to run or not. But if the base runner doesn't know the signal, he won't know what to do. Or the pitcher, the catcher, will be doing different numbers till the pitcher knows what kind of pitch to pitch. But if one of them gets their signals crossed, they're not going to communicate. Well, God wants to speak to his kids, but he does it on his calendar. And if we don't know his calendar, and if we don't know the signals, we're going to miss what God is trying to say. And so I like to tell people, I'm not prophesying anything. I'm not a prophet. I'm just more of someone who likes to look at the facts, likes to look at the history, the historical patterns, to kind of solve a mystery. And so when I see these things are happening again and what's happened in the past, I really believe God is telling people to repent, to turn back to his instruction, and to get ready.
그 테트라드의 비밀을 알았을 때 그때 그 기분과 그 느낌은 어땠습니까?
When I first saw this, I mean, I was doing like a hallelujah dance. I was just jumping up and down. I couldn't believe it. I had to go tell everybody. And that very following weekend at our service, I told everybody about it. And it was just a shock and awe moment. They couldn't believe it. But for me, it was just very exciting to be able to see something that no one in history on this whole planet has ever put these 3 things together. And so for me, it was just very humbling and just amazing to see science and history and the scriptures all come together and see this pattern. It just blew me away.
목사님은 유대인이시니까 주변에 유대인이 많이 계실 것 같아요. 예수를 안 믿는 다른 유대인들에게 목사님의 그런 하늘의 움직임과 달의 움직임과 역사적인 사건들, 하나님의 메시지, 이 테트라의 비밀에 대해서 다른 유대인들에게 이야기했을 때 그들의 반응은 어떻습니까?
Yes, I have Jewish friends. I have Orthodox Jewish rabbis as friends, and as well as very religious Jews who aren't rabbis. But what's interesting, in their own writings, what's called the Talmud, it is written 2,000 years ago. It talks about solar lunar eclipses happening on Passover and Tabernacles. It's in their tractate Sukkah, which is one of the sections of the Talmud. And so they, the religious Jews, all are very much aware of solar lunar eclipses. And they say that a lunar eclipse means something bad is going to happen to Israel. A solar eclipse means something bad is going to happen to the nations. So they've been aware of this for 2,000 years. But they hadn't made the connection to historical events. You know, it was kind of a peripheral or a sidebar note. And now I'm bringing it to their attention. And it was kind of shock and awe for them. Some of them said, well, let me look at this. They want to go back and look at it. And I've received emails back from some of them saying, this is really incredible. We're going to have to wait and see what happens. And I've been written up in Israeli newspapers by several Jewish prominent people have written articles, you know, about what I've said. And so I think they're more of wait and see, which is kind of like I am too. We'll have to wait and see what's going to happen. But it definitely has caught the attention of people in Israel, and it's been written up in their newspapers.
이 책을 읽은 독자들이 2014년도와 2015년도에 일어나게 될 그 테트라드 현상에 대해서 많은 관심을 갖고 있는데 2014년도 6월절, 초막절, 6월절은 4월 15일이었고요. 초막절은 10월 8일이었습니다. 2014년도에 이 절기 때도 어떤 사건이 있었을까요?
Well, first off, it's real important to realize that I'm not saying anything's going to happen on the very day of the eclipse. These are signs. And like if you're driving down the highway and there's a sign that says bridge is out, it better say 1 mile, not 10 feet. Okay, you're going to, crash over the bridge. So these signs are warning of things to come, not that things will happen on that very day. But when we look at what has happened, in my book that I wrote, and you can read it, I came out with this in 2008. Last November of 2013 is when I was writing the book. The book came out in March, and in the book I said war was coming to Israel. And it wasn't 2 months later the Gaza war took place in 2014. And so I see the economy is collapsing, which is what I also talk about in the book, the coming economic collapse, the possibility of that. But right now, as we're talking, the EU has just said that Hamas is not a terrorist organization. They've also passed resolutions that Israel will be forced to divide the land and create a Palestinian state by the end of 2016. We've had the rise of ISIS, who's going around beheading children. We've had Ebola. We've had all of these, there's so many things that have been happening that are grabbing worldwide attention. We have this economic warfare where Sony, the movie, has been hacked by people. You see Home Depot, the credit cards have been hacked. Target, the credit cards have been hacked. You're seeing, can you imagine what will happen if not like a war that we think of militarily, but a war takes place over the internet where all of a sudden all of the power goes out. We have no power. I mean, there's things that are happening right now that we would not believe, and that only 2 of them have passed. We still have the next 2. It'll be interesting to see what happens over this next year. But I still believe there's a good possibility, another war involving Israel, and a collapse of the economy by the end of 2015.
듣고 보니까 2014년도에 정말 많은 일이 있었네요. 2015년도 4월 4일 날 6월절, 또 9월 28일 날 초막절이 있어요. 이때도 무슨 일이 있을까요?
Let me put it to you this way. I don't know if the people that are watching are familiar with what's called the Shemitah year. The Shemitah year is a 7-year cycle that God said the land of Israel had to rest every 7 years. They've discovered that the Wall Street, the economy, the stock market, the financial markets is on a 7-year cycle. But amazingly, they're not only on a 7-year cycle, they're keyed to the Shemitah cycle. And what happened in 2001, that was the 7th year of the 7-year cycle. On Rosh Hashanah, which is the first day of the 7th month, the Dow fell 7%. And so here you see economic woes happening on the first day of the 7th month in the 7th year. You fast forward 7 more years to 2008. In 2008, the economy really crashed. That was the 7th year. And again, on the very same day of the biblical calendar, the first day of the 7th month, Rosh Hashanah, the Dow falls 7%. It was a 777-point drop on resulting in a 7% drop based on a $700 billion failed bailout, $700 billion loss on the first day of the 7th month of the 7th year. Okay, so you see a pattern, 2001, 2008, very same day biblically. So you fast forward 7 more years, that takes you to September 28th of September 13th, I think. September 13th of 2015 is when it begins the Feast of Tabernacles, and there's this total lunar eclipse, and it falls on a Sunday. Well, the markets are closed, so it can't happen on September 13th. The markets close on Friday, which is 9/11, which is the same day, that the terrorists attacked the Twin Towers, which I think is very interesting. So, but here's the thing, and this is what, if you could wrap your mind around this. Now again, I have to say what I'm not saying as well as what I am saying. But here's the point. If you understand the 7-year cycle, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then it begins with 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You following me? In Daniel's dream, okay, of the 70 weeks of Daniel, those are Shemitah weeks. And so what happens, there's 1 week left, or 7 years left, right? And so the first year of that cycle has to be the first year of the tribulation, because the tribulation is 7 years long, but it's based on the Shemitah cycle. So that means in 2015 in the fall, that ends the Shemitah year. So the fall of 2015 begins a new 7-year cycle, which means the tribulation could start in 2015. If it doesn't, it cannot start until 2022, because it's a 7-year cycle. It's not cut out of the middle of a week. Just like Monday can't come after Wednesday. Okay? The first year of the tribulation, Daniel was Jewish. So he's talking about Shemitah weeks, Shemitah cycles. And so here, 2015, the fall, begins a new 7-year cycle. So the potential is the tribulation could start this next fall in 2015. I'm not saying it will. I'm saying if it doesn't, then it cannot start for 7 more years, because it's one unit.
듣고 보니까 굉장히 이 심각한 얘기를 해주셨는데, 그럼 우리는 2015년이 새로운 7년의 첫 해가 되기를 기대해야 합니까? 아니면 그 다음 7년을 또 시작되기를 기대해야 됩니까? 우리는 어떤 자세로 살아가야 될까요?
Very good question. I have no fear. I have no fear. To me, it's almost a motivational thing. It empowers me. I have literally had a gun at my head twice. I've almost died so many times I've lost count. And I really believe if it's not my time, it isn't going to happen. And if it is my time, well then great. It's my time. There's nothing I can do about it either way. But when a house is on fire, you have people that are afraid and they're running out of the house. But then you have firemen who are prepared and they're running into the house because they want to put the fire out. And so I think it depends on what you believe your calling is. You have the 10 spies who were afraid of the giants. But you have Joshua and Caleb who were not afraid, saying, we can do it because God is with us. And so I am not afraid at all. We're all going to die someday anyway. And so for me, I have no fear. To me, I think it's a motivating thing that it's like the gun's ready to go off at the starting of a race, and the race is going to begin. And I'm excited. I'm not afraid. And it's like, this is, I think, could be our finest hour.
미국에 있는 많은 목사님들 중에 우리 마크 목사님이 하신 이야기에 대해서 동의하지 않는 분들도 있을 겁니다. 어떤 부분에 대해서 동의하지 않고 그렇게 동의하지 않는 분들에게 뭐라고 설명해 줄 수가 있나요?
I have pastors who disagree with me, but I also have a lot of pastors who do agree with me. And you always have both. There's always two sides to everything. I mean, some people think I'm crazy. Some people are very motivated, a lot of pastors, and they're really pushing this. Matter of fact, several pastors are writing books about my material, and they're getting all the information out to everybody. And so you're always going to have people that are naysayers or say no, and some that say yes. I'm on a mission, and the devil wants to distract us by looking to the left or looking to the right or what do other people think. I don't base what I do on what other people think. I mean, there were a lot of naysayers who didn't think Jesus was the Messiah too. Okay, that doesn't make them right. And for me, again, what's important that I tell pastors, I'm not prophesying. I'm not setting dates. I do not control an eclipse. I do not control the calendar. All I'm saying is, people, look at the science, look at the patterns of history, and look what God is doing, and just bringing it together. I tell everyone, you can put this in your own theological pipe and smoke it like you want. Whatever you want to take out of it. I'm just presenting information, and people that want to look at it, great. If they don't, great. It's not about me. I'm not trying to make a name for myself or anything like that. I'm just trying to get people to look at a pattern I saw, and they can do whatever they want. I think we're always supposed to be ready anyway. And if we can use this as a motivating factor for people to get right with God, well, then that'll be great.
예수님은 다시 오실 때 도둑같이 오신다고 했는데 우리가 그 예수님이 다시 오시는 날을 알 수 있을까요?
You say that he comes as a thief in the night, and that's what people say. That does not mean we're supposed to be stupid. Listen to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. It says, this is verse 1, "But of the times and seasons, brethren, you have no need that I write to you." When he says times and seasons, he's referring to the biblical holidays like Passover. He's not referring to 2014. He's not referring to, 2012. The word seasons again in Genesis 1:14 is referring to the appointed times. And he's saying, brethren, you don't need that I write to you concerning the biblical holidays. Why? Because you know them. Now listen to this next verse. This is in 1 Thessalonians 5:2. It says, "For you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord comes as a thief in the night." That's what it says. Now listen to this. It says in verse 4, "But you, brethren, are not in darkness, that that day should overtake you as a thief." So he only comes as a thief in the night to those who don't know the appointed times and the seasons. We have to look at things in context. So when he says he comes as a thief in the night, we need to realize who he is talking to. But he will come as a thief in the night to people who aren't prepared. Okay? But for people who are prepared, he won't come as a thief in the night. So you have to look at the verses in context. And right here in 1 Thessalonians 5, Paul says, he won't come as a thief in the night to you because you know the biblical calendar. You know the appointed times.
목사님은 블러드문이라는 책을 쓰신 이후에 미국의 방송에도 많이 나가시고 특히 시드라스 쇼도 출연하시고 한국에서도 이 책이 많이 팔렸어요. 왜 요즘 사람들이 목사님의 그 블러드문이라는 책과 그 메시지에 관심을 많이 갖고 있는 것일까요?
I think people are interested in this because, again, the sun, the moon, the eclipses speaks to the heart of man for thousands of years. Even back in the time of Columbus, people were afraid. They didn't know if there was a lunar eclipse or a solar eclipse, and Columbus used that to his advantage, making the natives think he had some kind of power when he didn't. But you can go back through history, thousands of years. Humans have always been interested in the sun and the moon and eclipses. It just speaks to the core of our being. And I think the reason why is because of what God says in Genesis. He created them for signs. And so I think just whether people realize it or not, they know something's happening. And I think people are interested in it because they're interested in prophecy. And people are interested in history. A lot of people want to go back to their roots. They want to find out who their ancestors were. And so I think people are interested because it's merging history, it's merging science, okay? And it's bringing the Bible. Everything's coming together. And so when you see all three of these things coming together, and the main thing is, no prophet can do this. This is out of any one person's hand. Everyone knows about false prophets who say things that are going to happen and it doesn't happen. Okay? This is beyond man's control. Everyone knows this is a God thing. And so I think that's what is making people excited because they're getting it. They're seeing that it's just the merging of science and history and the scriptures coming together, which is beyond man's control. It speaks to every language. And so I think that's why there's such a strong interest.
신학이라고 하는 것이 사실은 초대교회 때부터 시작되었다 이런 얘기를 하셨어요.
What is replacement theology? Replacement theology is when the church thinks they've replaced Israel. So there's a lot of different things that have been replaced. Even the fact that the Lord was born on the Feast of Tabernacles, which is in late September or early October, that's when he was born. We've come up with Christmas saying he was born. Now, I'm all for celebrating the birth of Christ, but let's do it when he was born. It's just that everything's been replaced, and so we're not on the right calendar. Now, Christians today, they don't celebrate Passover at all. They celebrate Easter. Well, Easter is to represent the resurrection of the Lord, right? And Passover represents his death. And so he has to die before he can be buried. He has to be buried before he can rise again, right? You know that Easter is a month before Passover 2 years from now. How do you celebrate the resurrection before he even dies that year? And so the church has gotten totally off the wrong calendar.